the morning, cars and coffee.
I don't know how much you remember of the first day that we met. I think around that time, you probably had like 2, 3, 4, 5 groups of visitors a day, per day, because your video launched and everybody just wanted to come and see you. Yeah,
that was 2012. My recollection is it was right after SEMA, November 2012.
You snuck into that SEMA too.
I did.
On someone else's badge.
That's my favorite all-time story of sneaking into SEMA as Bob Smith. I went there literally for a day on someone's borrowed pass. And that day was so memorable because Urban Outlaw, Tamir Moscovici's award-winning documentary film, had come out October 15th. SEMA was like 2 weeks later, Halloween. And I snuck in on someone's borrowed pass. I didn't even have access. And before I'd even gone in, I got there early and it didn't actually open till 9. And what else I remember about that day is I get a phone call and it's this guy, Robert Angelo, saying, hey, I work with Jay Leno, Jay's seen your documentary and would love to have you on the Jay Leno Garage Show. And literally I did that 3 days later. So that was a busy week for me, SEMA 2012, when I snuck in on someone else's pass.
It's so funny to me because a couple of years after that, you did the keynote.
Correct.
At SEMA.
For the anniversary.
Right, to open up the show. And then you even mentioned that, like, I snuck into the show.
Yeah, you've got a very good memory. I mean, SEMA to any car guy is important, you know, because it doesn't really matter what you're into. It's just that's the epicenter of everything that's modified in the car culture world. And I still find inspiration there. So to me, I had to get to SEMA. And ironically, when I did that keynote, which I think was 2017, driving there, I actually broke down on the way there, and I'm like, God, I got to get to SEMA, because my goal was I was showing the cars, and I was driving the cars to SEMA to show them, ironically, with Mobil 1 at the time. So these were all pivotal moments around SEMA, which really, the greatest thing about it is it brings everyone together. It's the epicenter, it's one of the world's greatest car shows, and it's right in our backyard, so yeah.
All right, so I'm here today for a couple things. We did a morning shoot to kick off the year, right, 2025. It's the second day of the year, and we already did a full shoot.
Yeah, I mean, we started at 6:21. It's now not even 9 o'clock, and we're done, so the year's off to a great start.
Yeah, I kind of just wanted to do a life update, because we've been working together for so many years. Let's do a deep dive, because we have the time to just kind of reflect, you know, so let's just start in the main garage area.
My heart and soul is Porsche. For those that don't know, I'm Magnus Walker. I was a 10-year-old, 1977. Dad took me to the Knowles Court Motor Show. So that's a long, long time ago in 1977. That was where I fell in love with Porsche, had the poster on the wall, and acquired my first Porsche in 1992 at the Pomona Swap Meet. Ironically, the car I'm most associated with, 277, this one here, is the second Porsche I ever owned. And I also acquired this at the Pomona Swap Meet in 1999. So this is a 1971 911T, which is currently, by my math, 54 years old. I've owned it 26 years, almost half its life.
Do you remember how much you bought it for back then?
$7,500.
Get out of here.
It was a 71, they were all $7,500 back then. I bought so many cars for under $10,000. I mean, the least expensive running, driving 911 I ever bought was $4,500. So you could pick them up all day long under $10,000. So this started life as a 71T. I bought it at the Pomona Swap Meet in 1999, 26 years ago. Had a 2.7 CIS motor in it at the time. It's currently gone through 3 or 4 motors. See this guy here?
Yeah, that nerd.
That nerd right there.
But I love this car so much because you've had so much history with this car.
Correct.
And like, this is what you're known for.
Yeah, it's the car I'm most associated with. It's the one I've owned the longest. It's the one I did all my spirited driving in. It's the one I raced in. I was a member of the Porsche Owners Club for many years, 20 years ago, doing at one point 40 track days a year on tracks such as Willow Springs, Thunder Hill, California Speedway, and many others. And this was always a streetable track car. You know, built as a canyon car that could be driven to the street, not a full-blown race car that had to be trailered. And to this day, it's still that same way. You know, the sum of the parts is not the significance of the car, it's the relatability to the build of everyone building their dream version of their streetable track car. Doesn't matter whether it's a Porsche or Sport or an import or whatever it may be.
Do you get to drive this ever?
I get to drive it whenever I want. Last time it was out, I took it to Pekla, the Porsche Experience Center in LA, for their last morning Shine Cars and Coffee thing, which was 2 weeks ago. So this is the car, like I say, there's 8 different Hot Wheels. It's in the 2015 Need for Speed game. It's in the CSR racing game. And perhaps the coolest collaboration ever was the one that I did with Nike and Ashod Ware on their 277 SB Dunk, based around 277.
I love this so much. For those of you guys who don't know, this shoe changes as you wear it. Not in that it just gets patina, but it's designed to get patina.
Correct. Yeah, you know, the car was originally gold, so underneath this white leather is gold. This, ironically, is my 4th pair. It's sort of a brand new pair that I'm breaking in. So like the car, the shoe is designed to age and get more character and patina the more you wore it. Like the car, the more you drive it.
So then it's like a special paint that's supposed to flake off.
Yeah, it was purposely built to distress rather quickly, so it would sort of shed its skin a little bit like a snake or a car getting rock chips by being used. Because I'm all about what I call memorable moments and smiles per mile. Cars need to be driven. It's like my daily out there. It's a 10-year-old 991 Turbo S. It's currently got 189,000 miles on it. It's only 10 years old. So to me, I'm not interested in cars that have no miles. Sure, people like to collect low mileage cars, but I'm more about the stories of what the car did, you know, on its journey of being driven, because ultimately these things are built to be driven.
All right, let's move on. 964.
Yeah, so it's a 1990 964. This car I built 10 years ago. It was perhaps my most performance-orientated build to date. You know, I'm known for these sort of color-blocked, race-inspired liveries, and this has none of that, but it has more design, aesthetic, and performance than any other car I've ever built, from the louvered fenders through the fender hood filler, the channeled hood, the channeled roof. Everything's custom modified. It's got a 3.8 RS spec 993 motor. It's rolling on my 17-inch Outlaw wheels. This was a program that ran from 2014 to 2019 with 1552. So it's wrapped in this Outlaw version of slate gray, weighs 2,540 pounds as you see it. And the goal here was to maintain all the 964 DNA, not to backdate or go wide-bodied, but keep the silhouette of the 964 being somewhat narrow-bodied, but change everything about it.
This is so cool, the roof detail.
Yeah, my goal here was to take elements of the 356, the Roof Yellowbird, and the Sport Classic. So this is inspired by the Sport Classic, the Rain Gutter Delete, Roof Yellowbird, and then I added my own touches, louvered fenders.
This is super cool.
Yeah, ironically, the first pair I did was on the car next to it, the 67S, or actually, I should say Rod Emery did. I hooked it with Rod Emery. Yeah, the most difficult part of this car was actually the ducktail. Like, ducktails look great on 964s. To me, the RS America turbo tail is too wide. So this is a custom 930 turbo tail without the rubber lip and then sort of raised up and channeled. So this turbo tail, which has been modified, doesn't exist anywhere else. It's a pure bespoke item. Then I've got things such as the integrated turn signals here, because generally the turn signals would have a whole housing and look like this. So this is being grafted in. This is inspired by the 911R, GT3
so cool.
Muffler.
It's similar design on this.
Yeah, this is sort of the baby version of the 964. When I started building my own cars, probably 2008, 9, 10, I was really inspired by the Porsche 911R from 1967. And I was building what I call these sport purpose streetable track cars, narrow bodied. And this is a perfect example of my interpretation of the 911R. It's got a 2.5 twin plug motor that was built by my buddy Matthias at Wicked Sixes in Hamburg, which actually dynoed at 278 horsepower on pump gas out of an NA engine in a car that's narrow bodied with zero aero. So 278 horsepower in a narrow bodied car that weighs about 2,000 pounds is a pretty good power to weight ratio. This is also a 67. 67 happens to be my birth year. I like these short wheelbase, narrow-bodied 911s. So this is another sport purpose interpretation of that car. And then what I do is do the color blocking and add some of my signature styles from my clothing background, such as the tartan interiors and different color blockings, which leads into the car next to it, the 78SC. You know, this is a car you and I have done some shoots in. So this is Porsche's first 3-liter car. Before that, they were all 2.7s. The 78 was the first year of the SC.
And then where did you get this, from the swap meet also?
This car, actually, I purchased it online from Pelican Parts. It was based out of Georgia. Ironically, the guy I bought it from had reached out to me in the past couple of weeks saying he was in LA and could he come by and check it out. So this was back when these cars were super duper affordable, and the goal here was what's known as a narrow-bodied IROC. Like the 74 IROC Porsche was really a wide-bodied turbo silhouette. This is stock SC front and rear fenders, but with a lighter fiberglass, what's known as narrow-bodied IROC front bumper, rear bumper, and then fiberglass deck lid.
I remember at one point you were getting these race cars that were caged, and you were taking the cage out,
Right,
and turning them back into street cars.
correct.
And that was kind of right around the period when the cars were going up in price.
Yeah, for me, still to this day, a track car is a great donor car to build a street car out of, because a lot of the performance modifications of going faster, handling better, and stopping in a shorter distance have already been done. And ultimately, race cars can be bought at an affordable price. I think you know that with your BMW.
Of course.
You know, the cost to actually build one far succeeds the value of what they're worth when people are sort of ready to upgrade to the next level of motorsports and racing. So I've bought a lot of track cars and sort of converted them somewhat into street cars. It's always a fine line of a car being too much of a track car for the street, you know, when it comes to cam profile and stuff like that. But cosmetically and mechanically, if it's just a matter of removing the roll cage, you know, putting in a different seat and maybe a carpet set, it's relatively straightforward and represents great value for money, especially in the Porsche world.
So whenever I come to this garage, I like to show people the two views. Of course, the view, you know, when the door is opening, that's very iconic, right?
Yeah.
But also from here, looking into the shop.
Yeah, especially if I close this door and I open it for you. Let's do that.
It's such a iconic view. And of course, I like that it's evolved over the years. You know, I remember when you were joking, looks like we have a couple water leaks.
Correct.
When you first started getting water-cooled cars.
Correct. Yeah, this wasn't the first one I got. The first one I got, ironically, was at the buck end on the other side.
Oh my God, the first
water
GT3.
Yeah, the GT3 over there. That's a 04 GT3 that I got in 2016. I was late to the water-cooled world. You know, in the Porsche world, people think of 911s as air-cooled, but air-cooled production literally stopped over 25 years ago. You know, the first water-cooled Porsche was really the Gen 1 996 over there. Mm-hmm. This was actually the third or fourth water-cooled Porsche that I got, which is another 996, the King of the Hill, the 2002 GT2. 23 years ago, you couldn't have got anything more badass from Porsche than this. Two-wheel drive, turbocharged, 450 horsepower, 6-speed manual. Ironically, that stat today that I just described is a 992 Carrera S, which is one step above entry base level on the Porsche 911 roster. But those are just numbers. What the GT2 does exceptionally well is it's just a thrilling driving performance the way it puts the power down. It can be a bit of a handful, you know, on the limit.
I mean, this is pretty much the Widowmaker, right?
Well, it's known as a Widowmaker,
Yeah.
But the key to these cars is, you know, it's all about throttle modulation and, you know, basically, if you're driving them below 3,000 RPM, they're actually pretty tame and pretty civil. Everything changes when you keep your foot planted and boost spools up. So the water-cooled turbo next to the air-cooled turbo.
We have quite a long history with this one.
Yeah, this is a 76 turbo. The car that I first fell in love with when I was a 10-year-old was a 1977 turbo. So I like 3-liter turbos. It's the first year of the turbo. This is the car that we debuted the Outlaw wheels on, which is when we reinterpreted the Fuchs wheel into the Outlaw wheel back in 2014.
This is the thing that I like about the style. I mean, you've made it okay to have this sort of patina, and you leave a lot of the stuff that comes with the cars on it.
Correct.
You know, that really goes with the whole "dirt don't slow you down." That's your slogan, right? That's
correct.
That's kind of like something you live by, and you know, I think it's cool that you've made it okay to have this patina.
For me, it's just my personal preference. I like things to be used and comfortable and worn in. For me, nothing needs to be perfect, and in reality, nothing ever is perfect. And I don't chase perfection. And generally, the cars come to me in a certain condition. And I generally like them the way they are. Unless it's improving them from a performance point of view, I always say the car determines how I modify it. It's like these turbos, believe it or not. They're all 3-liter turbos. This is the first US turbo ever sold in 1976. The one we shot earlier today is the 75, which was the first year of production of the 930 turbo, the iconic silhouette. Porsche only made 284 cars in 1975. The turbo is still the halo, king of the hill car for Porsche today. But this is a perfect example of this car has a great story.
This just turned 50 years old then.
Yeah. 50 years
so
old.
Then, if you guys want to watch this epic film that we all worked together on, we did a Haggerty episode on this one. It's honestly some of my favorite shots that I've ever gotten of you on video. Just so epic, all around downtown. So much fun.
I got to tell you, I've traveled the world, I've driven a lot of things, I've driven a lot of roads, I've shot with a few people. There's nothing I enjoy more than actually filming and shooting with you. First of all, you don't overshoot. People that overshoot, it's just more shit to edit through. You know what to get, you know how to get that shot, and you're open for anything. And when we shot that in downtown, that 110 tunnel run at triple-digit speed at like 2 to 3 or 4 a.m. in the morning, you were just gung-ho to do anything, right? And there was an element of danger and surprise to that shoot, and I think it might have been the first time you'd shot on the side of the freeway in that location, and you were down for it. And that footage is still some of my favorite footage because it captures that moment. You know, a spreadsheet will only get you so far, I say. We had an idea, we knew where we were going to go, we knew what we were going to shoot, but we didn't really know what we were going to capture.
Yeah.
And we got it in basically one take.
No, it was
and
so
that's
good.
what I love about shooting with you, whether it was what we did this morning, where you arrive early before 6:30, and we're done in an hour and a half, right?
Yeah.
And you get the epic shot. So it's a real pleasure for me to work with you because you're a creative shooter. And you just know how to make, you know where to put a car, how to position it, and how to position the camera to get a great shot without overshooting.
It's what we love to do.
Yeah. It's cars and coffee. So back to the water leak. This was the first water-cooled car that I've got. You know, these are 996s. You know, I'm a 996 guy at this point. My goal is to get, this is a Gen 2 GT3. America never got the Gen 1 996 GT3. We just got the Aero Kit look-alike car. But yeah, this was my first one. Obviously, it didn't have this livery on it. This was an example of me adding my sort of race spec Brumos-inspired livery to a GT3. And what I love about this car is it's so chiseled, but still analog. You know, and you park a new 992 GT3 RS next to it with the big wing, it just dwarfs it. That's an example of too much of a race car for the street. This is the happy medium as far as I'm concerned of, you know, it still feels analog and tactile and alive. And it's got pretty much all the performance you need for a street car.
It just happens to be water cooled.
Yeah, I mean, we need air and water to survive. You know, it's back to this Porsche 911 air-cooled thing. Porsche stopped making air-cooled 911s in 1998, 99, 26, 27 years ago. The 911's been in production for 60 years. So pretty soon, water-cooled 911s will have surpassed air-cooled 911s. Don't get me wrong, I still love air-cooled 911. I like them all. I'm about variety, whether it's naturally aspirated, turbocharged, water-cooled, it doesn't matter. The greatest thing about getting behind the wheel of any Porsche is when you get into it, ergonomically, everything feels right, fits right, the usable performance. So I was talking just then about the Gen 1 GT3. The Gen 1 GT3 never made it to America, didn't meet emissions and various other things. So what Porsche offered was what they call the Aero Kit, where it had the GT3 body kit on it and what's known as a taco tail right there, because it looks like a taco shell. It's a 3.4 liter, but didn't have the GT3 performance.
I didn't realize it had like those rear spats like that.
Yeah, that's all part of the Aero Kit.
That's pretty cool.
You know, Porsche's been doing these things like back in the 80s, you had a thing called the M491, which was basically a wide-bodied Carrera with a turbo body on it minus the turbo engine. So it looked like a turbo, but it didn't have the turbocharged engine. That's what this is here with the 99 Gen 1 GT3. And these are cars that, up to a few years ago, no one cared about them. There was always this thing about, you can't have a conversation with anyone about a 996 without talking about two things. They're all going to talk about what they call ugly fried egg headlights, and they're all going to talk about IMS bearing issues. And both of them are sort of somewhat redundant, These actually, no one cares about this headlight when it's on a GT1, one of the world's greatest car with the same headlight.
Yeah.
No one ever bitches about that. And you don't see them when you're driving. To me, it's a piece of Porsche DNA. They're getting better with age. And the IMS bearing really is not as big an issue as people think it is. It's only a small percentage of cars that had that failure.
I mean, if you want to talk about that kind of stuff, like so many cars, especially a lot of sports cars, they just have their inherent issues from the factory. Air-cooled cars, so many issues, right?
Correct.
Like just things that you have to fix or work
The old
on.
leak oil. There's a joke, if it's not leaking oil, there's no oil in it.
Valve adjustment every
It's like early turbos with small brakes. These things don't stop great. They actually have a 4-speed transmission, which the gear ratios are very tall. So early 3-liter turbos, and they're more of a GT car. They're not a great car in the canyons because the boost is coming on high, the power band is short, there's no power below 3,500 RPM, and the gear ratios are really too tall. Like first gear's a 50-mile-an-hour gear, second's 90. So you have to recalibrate your brain in a 3-liter turbo as to what gear you're in. Because if you come to a stop sign, let's say at 20 miles an hour in second gear, and you don't go down at first, and you pull away, you're not going fast at all. These only really perform when they're on max peak boost, and that window is like 3,500 to 6,000 RPM. It's a short window of performance, and they don't stop good. But these are iconic cars, but you got to remember, they're all 50 years old.
We did have a chance to do a full shoot on this also, and from what I remember, this might be one of the most early 911s to ever be modified.
Correct. The Porsche 911 debuted in 1964. Porsche only made 232 cars in 1964. I used to own a 64 911. At one time, ironically, I owned 5 of the first 1,000. This is VIN number 310. It's the 310th 911 ever built, originally delivered to Brumos Porsche, the world-famous racing team dealership in Jacksonville, Florida. I've owned this car probably a dozen years. It's a very significant car that I've done in this, what I call gentleman's race livery, slate gray, burgundy gold on a silver interior. It's been modified, it's lowered, it's got these Shield race bucket seats, still running its 2-liter engine, compared to the 66 next to it, which is bone stock in the Irish green. What's great about early 911s, though, is for the first 30 years, they're pretty easy to modify, to customize, to put bigger brakes, more horsepower in them. But this is the type of car that would have raced in period in the 60s. There's still a pretty effective 2-liter race cup series in Europe. Tuttle does a lot of racing in that 2-liter series with cars like this. Still short wheelbase, rolling on narrow 5.5-inch Fuchs. The car next to it.
This one's fully stock?
Other than being repainted once in the correct shade of Irish green, this is a bone stock numbers matching car. I've owned this car for probably 15 years. I bought it up in Seattle on a rainy day back in around 2009, 2010. This is like stepping back in time. We can't time travel, but the closest I can get to that is getting behind the wheel of this, almost 60-year-old 911s right here. And it's just a different experience. To me, I'm all about these analog experiences of being connected, feeling the car move, smelling it, the vibration, your hands on the wheel. New cars may do things more efficiently, but that's not necessarily better. New cars, you tend to be disconnected from everything that I'm describing that these earlier cars deliver.
We're all, now especially, we're just enjoying that analog thing. I mean, everything's been digital for so long.
Correct.
We actually appreciate the analog.
Right.
When it comes to film photography and cars and vinyl records, all that, it's coming back.
It has more soul, it has more character, it's got more feel. It's just more, it's more of a sensory experience.
I mean, it's the human experience.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
It's like you don't want AI replacing what we're doing right now, right? We don't want that. We don't relate to that. I don't relate to that. This here is the only car that I have that is not painted. It's a wrap. It's a 1995 993, sort of a semi-RS spec build that I bought from my buddy who was selling it at the time, Robert Angelo, thinking of selling it. He said, let me just drop the car off with you. Let me know if you like it. He didn't tell me that the car was wrapped in this shade of Mexico Riviera blue, because the original color is actually this darker midnight blue right here.
Oh.
So when it arrived, I wasn't in love with it. It wasn't running great. You know, the fit and finish wasn't great. But the more I drove it, the more I connected with it. And I have to back up and say, for me, the 993, it's not my favorite model of 911s. You know, in stock form, not that things need to be stock, but it's kind of a little bit of what I describe as the Cadillac of 911s. It's a little soft in certain places. But anyway, I ended up falling in love with this car. I bought the car. And I wanted to do this sort of urban camo, United Colors of Benetton livery on it, but I didn't want to de-wrap the car, and I didn't want to paint on a wrap. So I ended up, everything that you see here that's now vinyl, I applied with paper tape. And then I called you and said, hey, do you know anyone who can actually do a vinyl application? And he referred me to Gino at VadaWorks. And then he basically mocked up what I'd done by hand with paper tape and created this livery, which has now become pretty iconic and actually has two of its own Hot Wheels in this livery.
This one is interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've ever really talked to you about this car.
Well, I got to backtrack to when I bought my first Porsche in 1992, which was 33 years ago. That car was a red 74 911 slant-nose wide-bodied turbo conversion that I bought at the Pomona swap meet of all places. Probably 5-6 years ago, I started having an itch to get another slant-nose turbo. And I looked at all types, factory originals, I looked at DPs, Kramers, Gambalas, you name it. I went to Miami, I traveled all over, and I didn't really connect with any of those cars. They're either really expensive or underwhelming, or for whatever reason, I didn't connect. And then I got an email about this car, which ended up, ironically, to be a 74 US Carrera with this crazy 80s, 90s, wide-bodied 935-ish slant-nose kit on it, in Pasadena, less than 10 miles from where we're at right now. So I bought it on a whim. It's got a 2.7 RS spec motor built on a 1973 E motor, but it's somewhat of an all-show, no-go, because what it really needs is a big 500 horsepower turbo motor. I've only ever driven it a few times because it's not as fast as it looks, and it's not as fun as it looks.
It's so wild looking.
I mean, it looks good parked in the corner. But yeah, I'm a slant nose fan. I mean, over the past 5 years, you know, with people like Busy building some crazy big turbo slant noses, the slant nose is making a comeback. But I just didn't have the motivation to go down the slippery slope and make this the turbo monster that it should be, because as we know, those projects take a lot of time, energy, and money. So now it's just set in the corner. Let's
check out your parts room. So I remember when the 901 was parked in here.
Yeah, the 64 911 used to be parked where this 79 928 is. You know, I've got a lot of space. You know, I've owned this building that we're in since 2000. I've owned it 25 years. It's a 26,000 square foot warehouse. So it's a classic case of I've got the space, I've got the energy, I don't throw anything away. So this is the back parts stash.
This is like just that iconic scene. Have you ever had a chance to pull any of this stuff down, or did you ever need to pull any of this stuff down?
Yeah, I mean, occasionally. I mean, this actually used to be the tail that was on 277. At one point, 277's gone through a lot of different things. You know, over the past dozen of years or so, I've modified and built certain cars, so parts have been interchanged. I've never really bought parts. I've owned a lot of 911s, and cars come with parts. You know, if you come in here, this is part of the parts room. I don't throw anything away. So whether it's Weber carburetors or brake calipers or steering wheels.
I don't think I've been in this room since I first came here.
Oh, really?
Like, look at this.
You know,
so many
just
parts.
the amount of brake calipers. You know, these are early aluminum calipers that would be on a turbo. These have been refinished, zinc cad plated. These are pistons and cylinders you can see that came from my 67S. So I just don't throw anything away because you never know when you're going to need it.
Like steering wheels.
Early deck lid grills, early dashers, and then if you come over here, you know, I was talking about doing these R-inspired turn signals where I take out the original turn signal housing. So these would have come out of cars that I've modified with the 911 R-inspired turn signals.
You have your own little parts stash.
Door handles. Yeah, so this is the clean room. If you watch your step there, this is what I call the dirty room, which is more oil tanks, oil coolers, exhausts. And then we've got a whole bunch of parts in the main warehouse. This is just miscellaneous fenders and deck lids, window frames. Like I say, if you got the space, you can get reproduction, replica stuff, but it's never the same as the original.
Let's check out the main warehouse room.
Yeah, this is the 911 room. I'll walk you through into what it was the overflow room.
Now it's become its own thing.
Yeah, it's become its own thing.
I remember when I first came here, it was mostly empty, even in this room.
Yeah,
There was enough room for you to build a car right in the middle
I probably
here.
had maybe 8, 9, 10 cars in here. This is now 15. You know, you notice I don't have a lift. You know, I'm maxed out in this space right now. But it's not just the cars, it's the memorabilia. Like I went through a phase where I do custom plates. I was talking about my 65 911. This is from 277, because people would always say, what year's your car? Well, it's a 71T, what's the motor? At the time it had a 2.4S motor. And then it's the memorabilia, the posters on the wall, and just the things that I've collected over time. And if you come through to this room, there's more of that here. I mean,
Oh, this is your Hot Wheels museum.
yeah, you know, the first Hot Wheels I ever did was back in 2016 here. New for 2016. Started with one. That was the first one. This was the second one. And I've yet to own a 356.
I think this is my favorite one, where
Yeah, the
it's an
964.
actual character.
Yeah. So there's actually 3 different variations of that. This is part of the Red Line Club. This came out in 2018. This was the original one in the box with my figurine. This was the second one, and this was the third one. Now, I was talking about the 993, which became its own Hot Wheels. So you have that right there. And then if we go over here, whilst we talk about Hot Wheels, and we talked a little bit about 277, there's actually 8 different variations of 277. The original, the recolorway, the Zamak. So these are in the original casting. Then we've got the 3 slant noses. Then we've got a 997. And then we got the bus.
The bus is so cool.
You probably recognize that.
Yeah.
But people send me stuff. Like, these are not Hot Wheels. It's a different scale. But people, you know, send me stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. That is
So
cool.
anyway, we can go back to the
Wait, what's
Hot Wheels
this?
here for a moment.
Oh, this is the drive. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's a cool buck.
Yeah. I just really appreciate the way you lay stuff out too. It's really cool. It's like you actually care about all this stuff. You
Yeah,
know?
I mean, I'm all about doing cool stuff with cool people, so why not showcase that? You know, it's over here is the Hot Wheels, right? But this also showcases the Outlaw wheel that I did with 1552. This was the very first center. This was the very first sample wheel, and the very first set of wheels we ever produced, if you come over here, are actually on one of your photos, one of my iconic favorites of the turbo in the 2nd Street tunnel, shot in 2014. If you drive through that tunnel today, it's all graffitied up, and it's not 2 lanes heading west. It's really changed. That's a time warp piece of history with that Minerva Blue 76 turbo that you shot on the very first production set of Outlaw wheels. Back to collaborating, doing cool stuff with cool people right there.
That shot doesn't exist anymore either. There's
No.
a huge building there.
Right, so you shot that in 2014. There's the original Outlaw wheel on the back.
Yeah.
You know, so I don't throw anything away. This is kind of where I hang. It's a mixture of art and car-related stuff, you know, just memorabilia.
Let's talk about some of the cars that you have in
Sure.
here.
At one stage, this was the non-911 room, and currently it still is the non-911 room. So for me, when it comes to Porsche, it's about front engine, mid-engine, rear engine, both air and water-cooled. So what we have here is the water-cooled section, what Porsche would call Vasica-cooled, front engine transaxle cars. So we've got 928, we've got 924, 928, 944, 968. So in a sea of front engine cars, when people think of Porsche, they don't necessarily think of front engine transaxle cars such as the 924 Turbo. You know, this replaced the 914 essentially in 1977, a project Porsche developed with Volkswagen.
The interior on this is just so wild.
Believe it or not, this is factory stock 1980
That is so
US spec
crazy.
924 Turbo.
Very psychedelic.
Yeah. So these three cars are 1984 turbos, factory spec stock. The Al Holbert wide-bodied edition. Al Holbert was a Porsche factory racer, also had his own dealership, a little bit like Brumo's.
I've always loved the way these look so much.
So he was doing this in the 80s. We talk about current trend of modified box flares, wide-body conversions, which look great. This was done in 1980, 44 years ago.
Amazing.
And perhaps the holy grail of 924s is this, the 1980 924 Carrera GT. Porsche made 406 of these. A lot of people mistake this for a 944, because if you look at the flares, and these are bolted on.
Oh, this is a Japan delivery car?
It's pretty interesting. European delivery car that ended up in Japan, and I later found out this is a sticker from an impound yard, where somehow it got towed and ended up in a Japanese impound yard and then got exported to Australia. Believe it or not, I bought it out of Australia. So this car's gone around the world. Pretty significant car. Like I say, Porsche only made 406 of these. I've had this car, I don't know, a dozen years or so.
I love the seats too.
Yeah, these have been redone, but was a factory option in that pinstripe. These cars, they were black, red, white, silver. Obviously, I've modified mine. These are rolling on the 16-inch version of the Outlaw wheel. So pretty significant car. This is a 1995 968, perhaps the best of the front-engine water-cooled transaxle cars because it's naturally aspirated. It's got a 3-liter motor, so it's got a bit more torque than the 924 has. But perhaps one of my favorites when it comes to front-engine Porsches is the 928 here. You know, you look at this silhouette today, this was European Car of the Year in 1977. Believe it or not, Porsche was trying to replace the 911 with this, the 928. 928 was in production from 1977 through 1995. And if you look at the styling DNA inside of that center console, it was way ahead of its time. You know, that center console design language is in everything, from the Macan to the Panamera to the Taycan. And if you just look at that silhouette inside.
Yeah, the steering
this car,
wheel.
the design is 50 years old, but it doesn't look it.
Yeah, it is
These
something else.
are great touring cars. They handle
The
way
rear
better.
seats.
Yeah.
Wow.
They handle way better than you would think. You know, Porsche raced 928s. The V8's got a lot of torque, they're nimble, it's aluminum body, but you don't really see them on the road.
It's such a crazy greenhouse.
Yeah.
You know, in the back.
You know, in a weird way, it's like an AMC Pacer or a Gremlin in a Porsche when you look at that back DNA greenhouse right here. And the crazy thing about that is the rear seats actually have these crazy, let me see if I can pull them down, sun visors. You see that?
I've never seen that before. That is so cool.
Crazy, right? You know, Porsche's all about design. I talked about it earlier. You can get in any Porsche, whether it's a 928 or even a Taycan. The DNA still feels right. The driving position, the center of the wheel, the position of the pedals. You get in a lot of supercars of this era, let's say a Lamborghini Countach, right? You're kind of driving like this. You know, the steering wheel's not centered. Your head's going to hit the windshield. Ergonomically, there's always something that feels uncomfortable about it.
Yeah.
Because they're compromised in a way with the design. Porsche, ironically, for the first 30 years, never changed the interior door pressings of the window frame. So my 1999 64 actually has manual windows that came out of a 1965 912, and they just drop right in. You know, they designed it great once and didn't change it.
So what's going on with these two?
These are both parts donor cars. You know, when I was building more frequently, it was like having my own chop shop scrapyard. And I'd just pull parts off of these cars without having to, you know, run down the road to the wrecking yard type of thing.
Yeah, now these are worth more than $7,500 each.
These back in the day were $500 cars. This is a 68L, which I bought because I knew it had a 2.4 liter S motor in it. I think I paid $2,500 for it.
Now, somebody would restore these.
Sure. This back then was an example of a $500 car. This is a 65 912 with non-adjustable shocks and 3 gauges, but you can see I've got it just crammed full of parts. So we're talking about parts in the main warehouse. You know, yet again, I don't throw things away. So I have long block engines here, cases. Here's a 69S motor. Here's a very early 64 911. Aluminum cases. Ironically, I was telling you the story about the 75 Turbo where I found the original engine. That's right there. Never put it in the car. It's just sat on the shelf.
Oh, so this is the original engine. You don't have it in there.
No, I have. The weird part to that story is the engine that's in it is from a 75 Turbo, just not the numbers matching engine to that car. So ironically, I bought that car as a roller. I traded it. I didn't even buy it. I traded it into something else, pulled that 75 Turbo motor out of another car I'd acquired, and I didn't care about it being a numbers matching car. A couple of months later, the engine found me. This is the original case to that car.
How did you find it?
You know, the internet's a small world. I wasn't looking for it. I'd posted something about that car with a certificate which said the engine number, and I got an email from a Porsche guy who wrote a book on turbos saying, hey, I know where your original engine is. It was as simple as that. I didn't care to find it. I wasn't looking for it. It found me. That's the crazy part to the story of that car.
That's
So anyway,
cool.
I don't throw anything away. You know, these are all wheels. For the most part, they're all Fuchs. You know, there's hundreds of them. These are all those wheels that I pulled out and lined up. I mean, look at them here.
Wait,
And you got to remember.
why did you do that? What, just to show how many Fuchs
Well,
you have?
I didn't
or-
know how many I had, and I thought, let me catalog them to actually find out what I have.
Got it.
Because a lot of these wheels would have been on cars that are now running my Outlaw wheel. So I probably have, let's say, 10 Porsches on my own Outlaw wheel. So that's 10 sets of Fuchs that are probably over here. So I just collect stuff. I have no inventory on it. I kind of know what I've got, but it was like, let's pull it out, get an inventory. Maybe I start letting go of some wheels because I don't need it. I don't need 150 Fuchs, you know?
Right. If you sell a lot of those wheels, you could probably get another car.
Correct, correct. You know, some have been refinished, some haven't been refinished. So anyway, that basically covers what we have here, the 924, the 944,
Right.
the 968. This is my desk. This is interesting on the wall. This is all unsolicited artwork that people have sent in based around 277. So as I said earlier, 277, the sum of its parts, it's not that significant. But to me, it's very significant. It's a Porsche I've owned the longest, and it's become the most relatable car where, you know, people get inspired by it. Even here, you know. The great thing about LA is every OEM has some sort of design house, and everyone from Audi to Bentley to Bugatti has visited me. Here's an example of Audi came, and then a few weeks later, Audi sent me this. Based on the collaboration I did with Felix, where we did the pop art poster painting, Audi did a similar interpretation and gave me that. So people still get inspired, you know, by this car right here, 277.
That's so
So this is my desk. Ironically, before I ever did Hot Wheels, though, there was a Schuco version of 277.
So then
scale.
you move your desk out here because that one in there is like,
The only reason I really
Different.
moved out here is the Wi-Fi's better. And then when I got out here, it was just sort of like, wow, this is a cooler space. You know, 914 basically was Porsche's entry-level car that came out in 1969, the affordable Porsche that wasn't a 911. These were in production from 69 to 73. Perhaps the most interesting one is this, the art car, which I bought from my buddy Felix Holst. And then we did this rattle can project where the concept was to imagine this had been a former race car, and then it got sort of parked like a lot of race cars do out in someone's garage in the desert. And I came up with this concept, and I always say the idea is the most important thing, and what I'll show you here that's kind of interesting is my graphic skills are not that great, so I literally took a photo on my phone, printed out these sheets, and then started doodling this sort of Brit mod pop art race livery. And then Felix and I rattle canned it. Now, if you see here, these were just Post-its on the roof. And then the livery that you see on the back, let me move all this stuff, was just taped on, old school method. This wasn't created in some sort of, you know, digital format.
right. So it's like, kind of has like a little bit of a Union Jack.
Yeah, that was the whole goal, was imagine this card being sponsored by the Rolling Stones or the Who, and I took this arrow on the front of the hood, and the arrow became part of the flag. But as you see, it's not done in Union Jack colors. So Felix and I rattle canned this car literally right here where it is, and then took it to SEMA in 2018 and displayed it with Mobile One.
U.S. Air Force. So this is interesting because this one's a 4-spoke.
Yeah, so this is the base model of the 914, and you can tell that quite easily by it's on 4-lug wheels. Only the 914-6 would have been on a 5-lug Fuchs. Now, this is the 4-lug pattern of the Outlaw wheel.
I didn't realize you did the 4-lug.
Yeah, we did.
That's cool.
We made them for the VW World. The only issue was the wheels cost more than the car, so we didn't sell a lot of wheels. But yeah, we did offer a 4-lug, 4-spoke version of the Outlaw wheel. And then here is a 87 944 Turbo, and then the first year, the 92 of the 968. So some more collabs. In 2015, for the 50th anniversary of Momo, I became the first non-professional race car driver to have my own signature steering wheel, which was based on my favorite iconic Jackie Stewart and Momo Prototipo mixed together. And then we hand distressed the leather so the wheel looked vintage, but this was how it came out of the box.
I still have one, and I'm waiting for the right car.
Ah, okay.
I'm waiting for the right car.
Patience is a virtue.
Yeah.
And then perhaps the coolest thing on display here is the Nike collab, which I only ever did 2 drawings from, and I dated them right at the beginning of COVID. March 23rd, 2020 was version 1. Version 2 was April 2nd, a week later. And if you look at the shoe, it didn't really change drastically. This was the very first sample ever where I'm riding on a Sharpie with Outlaw, and we changed a few things, but that was the very first sample, and this was the final production sample. This came out in 2021 and sold out pretty quickly. So one of the coolest collabs I've done based
so
around
cool.
277. And then here's my sort of sewing area.
You still have a sewing area.
Still have a sewing area, still sit behind that sewing machine. And that's like the perfect opportunity to show you if I take off my jacket. This is an old Serious Clothing shirt, literally from 20 years ago, but what I did was added the red tartan on it and the arrows and put some
Because that's what
pockets in it.
you did before.
Yeah, that was my background. So I'm a rock and roller. I had this company called Serious Clothing that I formed on the boardwalk in Venice in the late 80s. Started selling Hot Topic in the mid 90s when they had 5 stores and they grew to over 500.
Is this some of the clothing that you have?
Yeah, this was the last. I closed Serious Clothing down in 2011, so that was 14 years ago. But this was the last sample line we ever did. So what you see here are just remnants of the garments of the last ever sample line. And ironically, we designed it all here. And ironically, look what's on the table just hanging here.
Oh, yeah.
Huh. So you guys designed it here.
Yeah, it was all designed here in this side.
Wow. And so is there a reason why you're still keeping this area the way
I
it
just
is?
haven't got. I'm sentimental, and certain things I'm just not ready to get rid of yet. And this was the very last clothing line I ever designed for this Serious Clothing brand. And ironically, the shirt that I'm wearing, I just pulled literally off this sample rack a couple of months ago, like this one, and then got behind the sewing machine and just updated it. So these are the last remains of the old fabrics that we made the garments out of.
Did you ever upholster any of the cars with any of this?
Well, the SC's got the red tartan C's. The red tartan from the SC came from some leftover clothing because it's this right here. And ironically, that was what we brought into the Nike shoe. Let me show you that, because that's a pretty good segue into using fabric from the clothing design and incorporating it right into the shoe. So that's the same tartan that's on the SC. It's pretty much the same tartan that's on my shirt, and it's in the sample Nike shoe. See here, it says sample.
And it's different color from left to right.
Yeah, so one side is red and the other side is blue. The blue matches the 67S in there. So kind of cool. This was the very final sample from Nike.
It makes me wonder how much those have gone for on eBay. Have you seen?
Well, let me tell you a crazy story. This is my 4th pair. Last year, I was getting ready to, I wear them every day. I walk almost 2,000 miles a year. It's all I wear. So last year, I'm getting ready to go to my 3rd pair. I go to my stash because I'd kept a few left over, in the box. And I try it out. I go, wow, this thing's tight. It's the wrong size. So I actually looked at the label and I'd saved 2 size 11s, but I'm actually an 11 and a half. Somehow I'd saved the wrong size. So here's the crazy part to the story. For my birthday, Hannah actually ended up buying a pair of my own shoes on StockX. and I think they're about $500. And this shoe, when it came out in 2021, it retailed for $119. I had 150 pairs of them. I gave them all away, except a few pairs that I saved myself. I never sold any of the shoes. I'd do a scavenger hunt where I'd leave one on the bridge or somewhere and do an Instagram post, and if you found the shoe, you had to get the matching pair, you had to come and find me to get the other side. I gave a bunch away to my buddies. I never ever profited from the shoe. But the crazy part to that story is Hannah bought my own shoe off of StockX, and it was about $500.
So I have a pair, luckily. I think I've only worn them 3 times because I'm so afraid. I'm afraid to like destroy
You gotta
it.
wear them. You gotta wear them. You gotta wear them. They're built to be worn.
So what's the deal with this? I've been seeing this since I came here. What's the deal with this? Did you punch a hole through here?
Yeah, so the space is actually 3 continuous buildings, my warehouse. The oldest one was built in 1902. When I bought the building 25 years ago, this was just, you couldn't walk through it. So literally, like, I just took a sledgehammer and whacked it way through in like 20 minutes, and that was it. We never finished it. It was just left raw, back to nothing needs to be perfect. The function was I didn't want to have to walk around. I just wanted to walk through.
It's so funny.
So yeah.
That is just like this hole. You
Just
punched
made a hole and then put a little concrete down, put in this cross with some skulls and made a step.
It's so funny that like not much thought went into it, but it's like really cool patina.
Yeah, it's all about form and function and purpose.
You know, I really did. When I first came here, I remember, you know, I took some photos of you guys on this little stair step area here. It's actually really nice and cool in here in the summer.
Correct.
Even though there's no air conditioning.
No AC. So
Yeah.
upstairs is warm during the summer and cold in the winter because there's also no heat.
Right. But
gotta
this is a
keep-
brick building in Los Angeles. It's crazy.
Yeah, that's now almost 125 years old that I've owned for 25 years. And we're in the arts district, which when I moved here 30 years ago was more desolate. Now it's become like the epicenter of things that are cool in LA. Anyway, this is my desk. Don't spend much time behind it anymore.
Yeah, so this is where you started your tour.
Yeah.
I remember way back
Ironically,
when.
another reason why I'm not here is my old PC is so obsolete the operating system doesn't even function anymore. So I talked a little bit about doing a lot of track days, 20 odd years ago. This is when I did a lot of track days, but look at the dates, 2002, 2003, 2004. This is 277 before it actually became 277. Circa 2002, 2003 at California Speedway right there.
That's so cool.
Yeah, here's one of the things from 2013, Road and Track. Here's Jethro Bovington, ironically, in 277 in the Crest, and then, you remember that car. So anyway, I'm all about, color blocking and theme. So this red, white, and blue theme goes all the way through the building. We've customized furniture. I talked about designing furniture. And then the other project that I'm working on, OPP, but not other people's Porsches, it's other people's Pininfarina. So I'm collaborating on this one-of-one livery with Automobilia Pininfarina.
Is this a Batista?
Yes.
So I had a chance to shoot the Batista for Pininfarina here in the US.
Was that the yellow car?
Yeah. So then what are you doing to it?
Well, to back up, Automobilia Pininfarina is the automotive division of the world-famous Turin-based Pininfarina design house, which has been in business for 95 years and is famous really for designing a lot of the iconic Ferraris. In 2018, Pininfarina debuted their all-electric 2,000 horsepower Batista built on the Rimac Nevera platform. In 2018, they built 2 life-size resin model replica design studies of that car. This is one of them that debuted at the Geneva Auto Show. So the car that you mentioned shooting, the yellow one, I got to drive that in 2023. Took it up the Crest, had a great time. And then from that conversation, this is how crazy the story is. Pininfarina said, hey, do you want this design size life study model? It was coming out of the Peterson Museum. It'd been there for a year as part of a Pininfarina exhibition. And they didn't want to ship it back to Italy. Believe it or not, true story. So I shoehorned it through that door into the warehouse. You got to remember, this weighs 2,000 pounds, but there's no drivetrain. the doors don't open, it rolls backwards and forwards, but you can't turn it. So it's a piece of Pininfarina history, or it's a white elephant paperweight. So I became the custodian of it. About a month later, the designer Dave reached out to me and sent me this as a little gift. And then from that gift came a conversation about how would I feel about designing a one-of-one livery on the actual car. This is part of that process of me just taping up lines which are going to become color blocked. And in the next month or two, we're going to announce to the world exactly what it is we're doing with the all-electric Pininfarina Battista.
Wow.
So my design study, like I was talking about with the 914, I always say the idea is the most important bit. You know, you can either do it in Photoshop or Illustrator or whatever program people use, but the idea is the most important thing. So what I would do is literally apply tape, and this was a barcoded inspired version of my 993 in a weird way, and I would just sit at various parts of this space and look at the lines and flow and just have fun basically taping up the car old school. Then I'd send these photos to Italy. Then they invited me out to Turin. I visited the design studio, and then they took my actual analog renderings and have digitized them into what will be revealed within the next month as the final livery on what will be a one-of-one customer car.
That is so neat.
So having the opportunity to work with perhaps the world's most iconic design firm, Pininfarina, is a real honor for me. You know, everything I've done before is just for myself with Porsche. This is a commission with the world's greatest design house, which I'm pretty excited about, actually making a reality, actually having it painted on the actual car, the transformation. So this is a work in progress design study, essentially.
Yeah.
You know, being British, of course, you love British cars. I'm no different. You know, it's a British thing. I'm currently in the Rolls-Royce era. This is an 85 Spur. Ironically, these represent exceptional value for money. You can pick them up for nothing. So I like vintage Rollses. I've always also been a Jag guy. I've owned E-Types. I've owned various things. And ironically, I wanted to do a project with a Jag XJS, and I even spoke to Ian Callum, Jag's former designer, 6 years ago when he was still there, about doing a hot rod XJS sort of on a touring car version. Ian then left Jag and the project never went anywhere. A little over 2 years ago, I got an email from a former Porsche guy called Lee Newton, who's now working as a consultant with TWR, Tom Walkinshaw Racing. For those that don't know, British motorsports engineering firm that was Jag's racing engineering development team in the 80s and won outright at Le Mans in 1988, amongst various other things like British touring cars. So his son, Fergus, is basically rebirthing the company, and they approached me to be a design consultant. And I said to him, you guys must be psychic. This is a project I'd actually wanted to do. So I came on as a design consultant 2 years ago, and then I brought Kaisel in, who is lead designer, and we worked together with the team up to when we debuted the car physically here on November 16th, a little over 6 weeks ago. So what we do is we take a bone stock V12 Jag XJS, such as this, which is super affordable. You know, the challenge with the XJS is it followed on from the E-Type Jag, the world's most iconic car, and could never live up to the reputation that the E-Type had. Ironically, the XJS was in production a lot longer, from 1975 to 1996, and Jag physically sold more XJSs than E-Types, but no one talks about that. But that's just history on the XJS. What we're doing is taking the donor car, putting this very sexy, sporty, wide-bodied carbon fiber body kit on it, taking the 5.3 liter V12, punching it out to 5.6 liter, and increasing the horsepower from around 240 to 660 horsepower, 554 pound of torque, and a 6-speed manual.
In terms of like a resto mod, I would have to say this is probably the most unlikely.
Yeah.
You know, I never would have guessed.
Which is what's great about it. The XJS is the unloved car, the unloved Jag. But ironically, Jag raced them in the 70s with quite a lot of success. Tom Walkinshaw famously raced in the 80s, won the British GT Touring Car Championship, famously raced the Jag at Bathurst in Australia, and the cars were pretty popular in Europe, but not stateside. But yeah, to answer your question, when you think of a modified resto mod car, you're not thinking of Jag XJS. So when I got approached by TWR asking would I be a design consultant, for me it was great because it wasn't a Porsche project. I was actually collaborating with an iconic British motorsports heritage brand, helping bring that company back. There's a lot of great resto mods out there on all types of great marques, but most of them don't have race pedigree heritage, which TWR does. These guys won at Le Mans. Not only did they win at Le Mans, they helped develop the XJR, the XJ15, and the iconic XJ220 was engineered and designed and built by TWR. Most people don't realize that. So for me, a real honor to be involved in that. You can see here I'm also in my C3 Corvette phase or era. These cars, I love the look of them. They don't do anything great other than look good. They're not fast, they don't stop, they don't handle, but when you're behind the wheel of them, you feel good. These are both C3 models, the third generation. This is an early one with the chrome bumper, 4-speed manual, 1969.
I love the headlights so much.
Yeah, me
though.
too.
I think they look so cool. I mean, I appreciate the fact that you can transform the look of the car.
Yeah.
With a push of a button.
And performance. You know, these are entry-level 350s, but you put a big block in them and make them handle. What I love about the Corvette is you have to respect the Vet. It's been in constant production since what, 1953? Over 70 years. Longer than the 911, longer than the Mustang. Always been in production. It's an American icon, an American legend. It's a piece of automotive history. And for me, this style, the Coke bottle styling of the C3 is really where it's at for me. And also affordable. I'm all about affordability and variety. You can pick these things up really inexpensively. Anyway, another 928, and you can see these cars are parked outside, they're covered in dust, you know, they're not precious. And then here is my 7627 RS MFI Carrera. Pretty special car. Porsche only made 113 of these. It's Porsche's last production MFI car, factory sunroof delete, manual windows, limited slip. Pretty special car. And then my daily, we talked about this briefly.
What a daily.
The 2014 991 Turbo S currently has 188,000 miles on it.
It's probably one of the most high mileage.
Yeah,
Turbo
I think so.
S's.
This car excels at everything. You know, if you're stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic, it's comfortable. If you want to rip up your favorite road, it's as fast as a GT3. Or if you want to drive to Moab and do 800 miles in a day, I've done it. This is the car to do it in. You don't get out with your ears ringing, you're not aching, you're not buzzed. And I park it outside. It's covered in dirt and dust. I don't worry about it.
Dirt don't slow you down.
That's right.
What's next?
Well, 2025 is a year for me to focus. I've got a couple of projects going. We talked about TWR, we talked about Pininfarina. There's going to be something special happening with one of these cars in here, so stay tuned. Time will tell what's next. Just more cool stuff with cool people like yourself.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I mean, while it's fun for me to look back, one of the things that I announced yesterday, today's the 2nd, and I announced my life's work book, 20 years of shooting, and a lot of the photos are with Magnus, luckily. And actually, the first photo, surprisingly, that I have in the book from 2012, I shot with a film camera.
Oh, even better.
Yeah,
Wow.
so in black and white, and I
No
developed it myself.
No way.
And it's just like a good texture, a good feeling, a good mood from the time. You know, so while, like I said, it's good to look back, and that's what I'm doing with this book, you know, just to tell, I guess, car culture in this generation for this time, like a good snapshot of it. But I'm still looking forward to doing a lot more stuff moving forward, but more on the video side. You know, there's still gonna be stills. That's always gonna happen. You know, stills, never gonna go away. But I love being able to tell these stories over video.
Yeah. I look forward to seeing the book because we have shot a lot of great stuff together. Nothing's better than actually, you can flick through your phone, but nothing's better than comfy chair, getting inspired, living the memories, seeing some new stuff with a book, right?
Yeah.
That's something that's tangible. It's back to that tactile thing. You got to feel it. It's got this, 400 pages?
400 pages. I said 2,000 photos, but it's actually more. It's
Wow.
2,500 plus.
So this is going to be a heavy book.
It's going to be a very heavy book, 11 by 14. It's going to be pretty epic.
So there's a real moment in time showing 20 years of your career.
So I know you're famously known for having the craziest camera roll numbers.
Oh, yeah.
Is it pretty high right now?
It's
Because
still
I know
pretty
you
high.
have to go through.
Yeah.
You go through phones pretty quick because of how many photos you take.
Well, look how many photos are on it.
What is it?
394,000. And this is a 5-year-old phone.
So it's funny because I've shot a
How many-
lot of
how
I've
many
shot a
million-
lot of photos, millions, but
Yeah.
you've shot probably close to 1 million or more photos just on
that
your phone.
Right. I guess you shoot more on the proper camera.
I think that's hilarious.
How many millions of photos do you think you've shot?
I don't know. It's tough to say. I mean,
10? Got to be 10.
if I had to guess, 10 is probably a good round
Yeah.
number.
500,000 a year.
You know,
over
because
20 years.
I was going between 250 to 500,000 a year. So I think 10 is probably a safe bet.
So let me ask you this: out of 10 million photos shot in a 20-year career that you've narrowed down to just a little over 2,000, how hard was that process of self-edit?
It was difficult. I mean, the way I kind of put it, the way I did it was about 100 per year, and then the heavy years, I would allow for it to go up to 250 or more, right? So like when I say heavy years, I'm talking about before I started doing video. I was still very focused on doing car photography. So I'm talking about 2012, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17.
That 5-year period.
And then 18 is when I started doing video,
Yeah.
right? And then 19, 20, continuously.
So the book's broken down chronologically.
Yeah, but it's backwards,
Okay.
right? So I want to show my best stuff first.
Is your best stuff current, or is your best
I
stuff
think
like
it's
20?
current. I mean, to be honest.
What makes it the
To
best
be
stuff?
honest,
Come on,
my
let's
best
be honest.
stuff, I think, is in the era before I started shooting video because I could just solely focus 100% of my attention on just shooting stills. But now I have to consider, okay, well, I have to leave enough time for video, and I also need to shoot video along with stills.
Separate, right.
So
Two things.
I think my best years were 15, 16, 17, 18, around that time.
Got it.
You know,
Good times.
and then not to say that my recent stuff sucks, but I'm proud of all of it.
Hey, we shot some great stuff today. When I saw you laughing and I'm in the car, I'm like, I got to get out because I know Larry's got a good shot because he's super excited about what
Yeah.
he's shooting. So I got to go see what it is.
Hey, I constantly get surprised. You know, we've been shooting together for so many years, and I've been shooting all my life in LA. That's a new shot that I never saw. That
Right.
was so good.
And the timing was great because the last time I was there, the sun wasn't out and you couldn't see downtown LA from where we were.
Yeah, no, it
So
was
you can
perfect.
never predict it.
It worked out great.
You just got to get out and shoot. Life at shutter speed, right?
There you go.
All right, man.